All right, so let's get started with this. So first we're going to talk a little bit about chronic disease. It is a long-term condition, and some things that we define as chronic disease are, of course, obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. The chronic disease, especially in industrialized nations, certainly can be prevented or delayed with lifestyle changes. Of course, we don't say can be cured or guarantee or anything, but we have certainly seen throughout time and throughout a lot of research that a lot of this chronic disease and a lot of the things that many of us suffer from, and people that we know suffer from, certainly can be prevented with those positive lifestyle changes, especially early in development, starting as young as children. And one of those ways is simply just healthier eating and, of course, more physical activity. And for some people, that sounds very simple and rather mundane sometimes. But if we look at the large picture of healthier eating through decades of life and physical activity through decades of life, those tangible outcomes of living a healthier life are going to be with us as we age, rather than potentially suffering from debilitating diseases, which when are upon us, we wish we would have changed something. So it's always prudent to start as early as possible and continue those positive changes. According to the World Health Organization, the WHO, the WHO, chronic diseases will account for almost 75% of all deaths worldwide. 71%, 7 out of every 10 deaths due to ischemic heart disease, 3/4 of all deaths due to stroke, and again, 7 out of 10 deaths due to diabetes in developing countries. And this is something that the World Health Organization is certainly predicting based on numbers and based on statistics that have been occurring throughout the years and based on the data that they've pulled. The number of people in the developing world with diabetes, staggering number, will increase from 84 million in 1995, so again 20 years ago, 84 million, to 228 million in 2025, just 10 years from now. And we all know diabetes is a very hard disease on people, type 1 and type 2. Again, 90% of them will be type 2. But looking at almost a 2.5 time increase in number of diabetes. And again, a lot of this can be prevented through proper nutrition, proper physical activity, better sleep habits, just better lifestyle choice. It doesn't mean we have to completely go 180 on everything that we love and do and never do it again, but making smart choices over the long term can reduce that risk. Nutrition, widely accepted tool. It's very easy to say eat better, but how do we eat better? While also enjoying our life, while also trying to perform. Sometimes we think, well, if I eat better or eat less, I won't have enough energy to perform, so that doesn't work. Or if I eat to enhance my running or my lifting, I may be eating too much, so I'm not eating less and I'm not watching my weight. And sometimes there's always a give and go, and we have to find that perfect center of the circle, and that's very difficult for some people. But looking at the long-term effect, our life as a whole, we want to live as healthy as possible, and picking the healthiest options and eating the healthiest way possible based on what our goals are is going to have those positive impacts. Important for management and treatment of chronic disease. More and more doctors and more physicians are looking at preventative medicine. More and more nutritionists, dietitians, physical therapists are getting in more and more with the preventative treatments, because of the money that's being spent on healthcare these days, preventative treatments are long-term just less costly and can be more effective in the long term if we do them properly. Chronic intake of proper nutrition, again, long-term beneficial effects And those small lifestyle changes over the course of time will have the most dramatic impact. Unfortunately, as industrialized people as we are, and Americans, we look for the tangibles. We want to see something occur to know that it works. We want to feel something, see something, taste something, know that it works. And these small changes we never are able to see immediately. It takes years for us to notice that nothing happened. It would take years for us of proper eating and proper diet and proper physical activity to see that we didn't get diabetes. So that is difficult for some people to grasp, of doing all that work to see nothing, but that nothing is everything. That nothing is not getting sick or reducing the risks of these chronic ailments and diseases. And that's what we have to focus on. What can we do to prevent these things, to see nothing? This is a chart, again, from the World Health Organization, just looking at the classifications of obesity based on BMI, which is kilograms over meters squared. You can see that there are classifications for underweight, normal range, overweight, and obese. The BMI is a good tool to recognize based on your height and current weight. I wouldn't necessarily say it is the best tool to know whether or not you are the healthiest person, because there are athletes out there that are in the obese range. They have a BMI greater than 30 because they have so much muscle mass. It puts them at that obese rate because of their weight just being mostly muscle. So we don't necessarily want to use BMI as a determinant of saying, I'm in this range, I'm unhealthy. But we want to look at it as, I'm at this BMI, what is my fat mass? What is my muscle mass? Does it correlate with this number? And am I living an unhealthier lifestyle? And what can I do to make these changes to get myself to a normal range or a better weight and better BMI? 2.5 million deaths can be attributed to being overweight and obesity worldwide. Now, again, we're not saying because someone's overweight and because they're obese, death will occur. What that statistic is saying is, because chronic overweight and chronic obesity has secondary and tertiary effects with blood and insulin resistance and just overall weight, how the heart has to pump, physical inactivity, sedentary lifestyles, those can lead to chronic diseases which lead to death. And a lot of those, again, diseases can be prevented if we maintain proper weight, if we increase and maintain proper physical activity and nutrition. 70% of cases of CVD are associated with obesity, cardiovascular disease, cerebral vascular disease. Worldwide, 1.1 billion overweight adults. And again, we're using the overweight and obese numbers based on the BMI. Overweight, 25. We'll go back. So you can see overweight greater than 25 to 29, and then obese greater than 30 BMI. About 312 million of the 1.1 billion are clinically obese. And by the end of 2010, so again, this was a few years ago, so we can assume that these numbers have gone up since then, 43 million children under 5 years old will already be overweight. Like I said earlier, starting children off early with proper nutrition, proper physical activity, gets them on the right path. We know children have a very high tolerance for learning at a young age. They learn languages at a young age better than adults at an older age. They learn how to walk, they learn how to run, they learn how to do everything. So if they can learn how to eat, they can certainly learn how to maintain weight better at an early age. And 43 million children under 5, what will those numbers be whenever they're teenagers, when they're young adults, and what will that cost be on us as taxpayers as well? By 2015, the worldwide obese population, about 1.5 billion. And that is a staggering number to really think about. So 1.5 billion, which is about 1/5, maybe 1/6 of the world population will be obese based on their height and their current weight. 2015, this is again taken from the WHO, projected prevalence of overweight. So again, BMI over 25 kilograms per meter squared. And they used women ages 30 and above for this. And as you can see, a lot of heavily industrialized nations tend to be in the higher colors. Looking at North America, even South America, we see that greater than 75% by 2015 are going to be deemed overweight based on their BMI. Australia, looking at some of the countries in Africa, the numbers are a little bit lower. Even in some of the countries in Eastern Asia, those numbers tend to be a little bit lower. But looking at these heavily industrialized nations, especially North America, that is a staggering number that 3 out of every 4 women over 30 are projected to be overweight this year. If we look at the CDC, whenever they posted their information on percent of obesity based on the states, you look at 1985, no data to collect on over half of the states. Those are the states in white. Less than 10% of the population would have been deemed obese in the very light blue. And then as you get to the darker blue, 15 to 19%, and those tend to center around the Atlantic area, the Ohio, West Virginia, Virginia area. All the way to 2010, look how those numbers have changed. The South and Southeast and South, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee area, greater than 30% of the population is said to be obese, with a BMI of greater than 30. So, looking at how we moved from, taking West Virginia, for example, in the 15%, going all the way to 30%. So they essentially, in 25, 30 years, doubled their obesity rate. And what was the prevailing factor or factors to cause this? As an industrialized nation, we increased dramatically these numbers of obesity, and this is where some of these chronic diseases are occurring. And a lot of these chronic diseases can be prevented by maintaining healthy, maintainable weight. Here are some trends in obesity among children 2 to 19 years old. And they started these numbers looking in the early 70s all the way up through 2012. And you can see as these numbers start to escalate in the early to mid 1970s, the numbers remained pretty flat, but then all of a sudden they started to rise closer to the early 80s, and then a steady rise all the way through the late 90s, and then kind of peaked around early 2000s, dropped a little bit, and then peaked again, and so far have plateaued. So we have gone from percent obesity in children, roughly about 5%, all the way up to almost 20% at one point, and probably hitting around 17% on average right now. These numbers, 2 through 19 years old, what are these children going to be whenever they become adults? Are they going to know how to maintain their weight or reduce the weight to prevent these diseases? Are they being taught properly? And the next slide may shed some light on as to how this has happened. So if you look at the trend, mid 70s, they kind of started. It's gone up since then, the last 30 plus years. And here's obesity and food choices and where Americans eat. And this was taken from statistics from 1889 to 2009. Now, if you look at the bottom, fast food wasn't tracked before 1929. So fast food is in the red, and you can see that it's really not even in there up until about in between the 1925 and 1931 areas, about 1929. In the green, you have home. So if you look at the very beginning, around 1889, most people ate at home, and very few people, over 91, 92%, 93% technically, was eaten at home, and the other 7% other away from home, whatever that meant, whether people were traveling or at other people's houses or whatever. And then we get to 1929 and fast food kind of takes on. And then you can actually see, if you look around the 70s, fast food hits a large boom. And
steadily the other way from home has increased, but the quickest increase correlated with the quickest decrease was fast food and home. So less people have been eating at home around 2009, and the quickest increase was fast food. And we can look at that and say a quick jump, as you can see, is somewhere in the 70s. So somewhere around there, that fast food industry really took off, which may have led to a lot of these children in the 70s as well, that percentage increasing. Now, not saying for certain that fast food has directly caused this, but it's a neat chart to look at with those specific times to say what around that time caused these spikes in younger people to increase their BMI. Was it decreased physical activity, increased poor nutrition habits, increased processed foods, or multiple factors to play into? So it's a very neat, interesting, and slightly sad statistic to see that we are on this path and continuing on this path now. In 1960, the average dinner plate was approximately 9 inches. 2009 is approximately 12 inches, and we know that the inside of the plate does not deem that that's where the food goes. That food sits on the very edge of the plate. We pile as much as we possibly can onto that one plate. So granted, that plate is only 3 inches bigger in diameter, but we know to pile more food. We've learned the craft of being able to put food in certain spots to basically hold it, and how much more can we fit on that. So whatever food was meant to be on that 12-inch plate, it certainly superseded that. And because these plates just continuously get bigger, we feel that we continuously need to fill them. And we fill them with improper amounts of food, improper nutrient proportions of food, overly processed food, and we wonder, just once, it's fine, not a big deal, but over the years and over the decades, these do become issues, and we don't know until it finally hits us. Continuous rising epidemic, and it's really the food-related cause of diabetes. A lot of people say, well, if I eat too much sugar, that can cause it. It's really not the answer. Diabetes, whether it's type 1 or type 2, has to do with insulin, and really it's obesity, chronic overweight, chronic obesity that does not allow that insulin to be transported through the body. It creates increased insulin resistance, puts a lot of oxidative, cellular, and structural stress on the body, and that can lead to diabetes. So again, it doesn't have to do with just sugar. It has to do with the overall aspect of obesity and all of its nuances that cause this disease that is, from the previous slides, in the 80 million of, in the 80s, all the way up to 228 million in the next few years. So this is something that people do have to be concerned about. And can you maintain proper weight to reduce the risk of diabetes? A movement towards unhealthier food choices. Is that the main cause of obesity? Is it a movement away from continuous physical activity? If we look back 100 years ago, there were still many people who had to farm for their livelihoods. Many people had cars were not as prevalent. Many people had to walk or bicycle to work. We've been able to make it a lot easier for us to attain certain things. So does that decreased physical activity lead to it, or is it a combination of both? Most researchers would say it's certainly a combination. And what can we do about that? A gradual long-term move from natural food sources and certainly to processed food items. There was some research that recently came out that almost 70% of all the food that we eat now on a daily basis is processed. So for every 10 items, 7 of them are processed somehow that could be relatable to the increased epidemic of obesity. As an industrialized nation, we certainly sacrifice long-term positive health for things that we hold dear, the comfort and accessibility of getting food, getting it cheap.
the ease of use, the ease of eating it. Sometimes it's just so much easier to go someplace and find something that's wrapped for us and already made and just eat it. And we're all guilty of that. But what are we sacrificing when we do it? And are we going to do anything about it? This is a long-term development. If we looked over the years, it took 30, 40 plus years to see those large numbers increase. This is something that won't go away in a few months, in a few weeks. This is something that's going to take just as long to eradicate or to reduce, where we can say these numbers are positive. These numbers are looking up for us. And so it's up to each individual to make sure that they're doing their due diligence to make sure that they maintain their weight. They look at their nutrition as a whole, and they make those positive, constructive sacrifices for themselves to lead happier, healthier lives. Here's just a meal planning guide for some people that like to use visuals. 1 cup equals about the size of a baseball. So for some people, it's very difficult to imagine what an ounce looks like of meat, or what a cup of rice looks like, and those kind of things. So sometimes we just pour them out, and every time we do it, sometimes it just becomes a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And eventually those numbers are too high, and we see negative changes. We see increased body weight. We see increased stress. We see decreased motivation to do anything, decreased performance. We wonder what happened. I was eating right. Well, you may have been eating good food, but you may have been eating too much or even too little of it. And so here's just a good way to kind of look at sizes. If you don't have all these measuring tools, if you don't always want to constantly measure, you can kind of get a grasp of what it looks like. The things that we're going to talk about today are obesity and how it relates to cancer, and we're talking about disease prevention. And there's many diseases that we could talk about, and this would take days and days and days. And we want to talk about specifically obesity and its relation to cancer, and what we can do to hopefully reduce those risks, and what we can learn about obesity, cancer, and apply these to our daily lives and hopefully to our families' lives, and it'll just spread. Looking at this chart, evidence about 1/3 of cancers, about 33%, and the range goes from anywhere between 25 to 35%, are related to higher body fat percentages, the lack of physical activity, and poor nutrition. So that's the trifecta. The poor nutrition and the lack thereof, the low physical activity levels and leading a sedentary lifestyle, and the high body fat percentages are all relatable to higher risks of cancer. Cancer, and for those of you, is as simply defined, abnormal and rapidly growing tissue. We're not going to get too much into detail about what cancer is, but and for those of you who've also heard the term carcinogen, it's a substance that promotes the development of cancerous cells. Carcinogens can come from anything. They can come from the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, the lotion that we rub on our hands and our body, and even just internally. And the things that our body produces, free radicals, different negative products, that to create one good product, we sometimes have to have a negative product that we excrete, and sometimes our bodies don't do a good job of doing that, and those can also build up internally. If we look at the chart, cardiovascular disease percent deaths is approximately 41, cancer about 29, respiratory about 8, diabetes about 4, and then other at 18. Well, if you take all those, cardiovascular disease, certainly risk can be lowered through nutrition. Diabetes, certainly risk can be reduced through nutrition. Specific cancers can certainly be reduced. The risk reduced through proper nutrition, physical activity, reducing body fat. So a good portion of these non-communicable causes of death can be reduced and prevented through the three things: increasing physical activity, better and proper nutrition and food choices, and reducing body fat percentage. The statistic shows that cancer kills about 1 in every 4 Americans today, approximately.
If we go back 115 years, that number was 1 in 33. We have increased the rate cancer has killed us 8 times, 1 in 4, 1 in 33. So what have we done in the 115 years that's changed that dramatically? It's probably a multiple of things. It's probably the air pollution. It's probably reducing activity, living a more sedentary lifestyle where more of us are at desks and more of us are doing more sedentary work. Overly processed foods and not taking the time to actually spend time cooking in the home. Overeating as we want and eat more. Certain prices are reduced and we can get more food for cheaper. We can pile more food onto bigger plates. So it is a plethora of things that have happened with or without our consent that have led to these things. And it is each independent person's due diligence to make sure that they stop or they look back at certain things that they can do and say, I can modify this, I can change this, I need to change this. I want to change this, and that will certainly help. Small changes go a long way. The 3 things, like we said, the contributors to the 1 in 4 now used to be 1 in 33, higher body fat percentage, lack of and poor nutrition, and low physical activity. Looking at this chart as well. This is a chart just taken about, looks about 20 plus different countries, and it's basing the percent of deaths from cancer ages 55 and older. So again, percentage is on the y-axis, and then animal fat grams per person per day. So basically how many grams of animal fat going across on the x-axis. And it shows a pretty linear increase as it becomes a more developed industrialized country. We see that an increase in animal fat, higher death rates from cancer from 55 or older. Now, this does not mean eating meat equals cancer. That is absolutely not the statement that's being said here. But what is being said is we know that overly processed meats, different ways of cooking the meat, so charring, charbroiling, charcoal, high flame, can all cause carcinogens in the meat and in the way that it's being cooked. The type of meat, whether it's a processed meat with specific nitrates in it, the amount of meat. Some of us stick to just a few ounces a day while others can have a 2-pound porterhouse. And also with that comes increased carcinogens, increased fat, increased calories, but also looking at it from a secondary method, not just the meat itself, but maybe that because an increase in the type, the amount, the cooking of the meat, and the processing of the meat, we've also seen a possible reduction in vegetables and fruits, because we may fill ourselves and may get too full while we eat these highly overprocessed, overcooked, different types of meats. And you can see USA in green, upper mid area, Austria and Belgium on the higher levels with Germany. They tend to eat more grams of animal fat per person per day, and that percentage of deaths from cancer is certainly higher. But again, we are not saying that eating meat equals cancer. There are other factors that of course play into it, but this is just a very interesting look at the countries that tend to stick with a more plant-based diet, a lower calorie level diet, of vegetables and fruit-based diet, tend to have lower levels of deaths from cancer. Now, this basically says that if we want a chance to reduce levels and reduce the risk of certain cancers, we should naturally then consume more fresh and frozen vegetables and fruits. 1, the high fiber intake. 2, the antioxidant properties of fruits and vegetables. Antioxidants help break down and reduce free radicals, and free radicals cause cell damage.
because it's a fresh and frozen fruit vegetable diet, eating more of those throughout the day and over the course of time actually leads to calorie reduction and calorie restrictions and weight reductions, because compared to meats and overly processed foods, those tend to have higher calories, whereas fresh fruits, fresh and frozen fruits, fresh and frozen vegetables tend to have lower calories and certainly more nutrients. And this goes back to our statement of eating more nutrient-dense foods rather than calorie-dense foods. The low carcinogen levels and ways that we should be eating these fresh and frozen vegetables, steamed, boiled, and roasted, are certainly the three best. There are many other ways, but those tend to be the three best that don't lead to high carcinogen levels, keep those levels of nutrients that we want in the food to help battle some of these negative things that go on in our body. Many times we've said body fat is highly associated with the risk of cancers. It is hormonally active tissue, so we do have to be conscious of that. It's not just sitting there taking up space. Fat, adipose tissue does send out chemical responses and certain enzymes that disrupt chemical signaling and can alter just regular cell function. And of course, we don't see that. We don't feel that every day. We can't sit there and say, oh, I have cellular disruption today. I need to eat more fruits and vegetables. This is where the intangibles have to come into play. And we have to just recognize that doing this is for our benefit, whether or not we see anything happen or not. Sometimes the best thing to happen is nothing to happen. The waist circumference, and this is something that I'm sure some of you have heard maybe from your doctors or when you've gone to get a physical, there is a higher disease risk with a greater waist circumference. And sometimes you'll maybe back in the day when you were in high school or college, they may have measured you, or if you've gotten a physical, they've measured around your midsection. There is a higher risk with more fat around the midsection area. That risk factor, certainly those risk factors go up when men have a 40 greater or equal to 40 inches measuring across, and women greater than equal to 35. So one of the things that you can do to reduce that risk of disease and lower that disease prevention, whether that's diabetes, heart disease, stroke, different cancers, is reduce your waist circumference. So men should be below 40 inches, women should be below 35 inches. Increase in fruit, vegetable consumption, polyphenols, antioxidants, and thiols all have enriched cellular function properties, protect cell integrity and signaling. So the cell integrity, the structure of the cell, the membrane of the cell, the signaling, passing information from one cell to another. If the integrity of the cell is disrupted, the cell could essentially die. And more cells dying means more and more tissue dies, which means more and more full body disruption. Disrupting the signaling between cells. When cells can't interact with each other and send messages necessary for movement or for pulse or heart rate or for blood flow, those things get disrupted. And when we have very important procedures in our body that get disrupted, we see and unfortunately later on feel those effects. Heart attack, stroke, chest pain, angina, those kind of things, diabetes with neuropathies. So having an increase in fruit and vegetable consumption increases the cell integrity, increases and betters cell signaling, and it reduces cellular stress and inflammation. Inflammation is a good thing when we're working out. We know that we're getting nutrient flow to the inflamed area to help protect it, to help encourage growth and development. But inflammation for inflammation's sake is not a good thing. That means something is overly active and getting stressed over than what is necessary if we are not doing anything to cause an inflammation. So those things, just inflammation for inflammation's sake, is not a good thing. So fruits and vegetables help reduce that inflammatory process. Decreased caloric intake can also lead to decreased weight. can then lead to decreased obesity risk, can then lead to decreased cancer risk. So again, these aren't just, if this happens, this will happen. These are secondary, tertiary, quaternary things that happen that we have to take into effect that will help us develop proper health as we get older, when we know physical activity may decrease as we get older. Nutrition habits may change as we get older, but the better that we can start now, start as young as possible, the better chance we have of reducing and preventing the chance of certain diseases and cancers, and also reducing the risk of becoming obese, which then leads to higher risk of cancers and to certain diseases. So we've all heard apple-shaped and pear-shaped. The apple shape actually is at higher risk because more body fat is closer associated with the midsection, and that midsection contains a lot of our vital organs, lungs, spleen, kidney, heart. And so with more fat creates more resistance around those lungs too, around those necessary organs that have to work every second of every day of our life. So having more fat around the midsection area puts a lot of stress cellularly and physically on those organs and on the peripherals that can later on lead to disruption and overall damage to the way we work and the way we move later on in life. Pear shape is associated with lower risk, more weight in the hips, more weight away, more fat away from those main parts of our body and those main organs, but also as protective areas around our hips and around our glutes and our mid-thigh area. So pear shape, certainly lower risk, apple shape, certainly higher risk, and that apple shape is where we certainly measure the midsection, that 40 inches for men, 35 inches for women. So we want to reduce that size around the midsection to reduce that risk of cancer and disease. The links between diet and cancer, the main things that we can do: reduce oxidation, reduce inflammation, reduce immune suppression, reduce blood sugar, and reduce stress. Now, you'll notice that there are many different things that you can do to reduce all of these, but the three that constantly come up, and if you actually look at this, is inactivity, body fat, and nutrition. Inactivity is in all of them. If we reduce inactivity, so increase activity, we can reduce oxidation. If we increase activity, if we reduce the inactivity, we can reduce inflammation. Same thing with immune suppression. Staying away from alcohol, staying away from smoking, reducing body fat, reducing the stress, the overall stress that we have. Everybody goes through stress. Everybody's always going to have stress, but can we reduce it so it doesn't become a burden on us, which then leads to us overeating, higher blood sugar, infrequent meals, poor meal choices in the morning, too many meal choices in the evening, too much eating around one time of day, that infrequent meal placement rather than a meal placement that is set over the course of so many hours at a more frequent time frame, at a more patterned time frame. So reducing all of these, even just a few of them, can certainly lead to much healthier lives, reduce risk of certain cancers, reduce risk of obesity, which then leads to certain diseases. So the goal is to always reduce the risk of obesity, because that is really one of the main culprits right now that we're seeing in research for a lot of these non-communicable diseases and deaths. Some people automatically run to nutritional supplements, and one of the things that we always try to preach about is nutritional supplements are only as good as your diet. If your diet is junk, the nutritional supplement will work like junk. You really have to have a good diet because it's supposed to supplement, not change your diet. You're supposed to add to it. So if you have a great diet and you take a nutritional supplement, your goal is for that nutritional supplement to enhance that great diet. If you have a poor diet, these nutritional supplements will not take the place of a great diet. They will not, in fact, turn a poor diet into a great diet. So you really need to hone in on what your nutritional essential background is, what it is that you're eating on a daily basis, how much are you eating, and is nutritional supplement then even necessary if you are able to get the antioxidants that you need, get the nutrients, the micronutrients, the macronutrients, the phytochemicals, the minerals and the vitamins that you need for your body to maintain weight and maintain its integrity. Is a nutritional supplement then necessary? Some people automatically take antioxidants to prevent certain cancers and to reduce oxidative levels, like beta carotene, green tea, vitamins A, C, and E, and selenium, and there are many, many others. The whole idea of an antioxidant is reduces oxidative stress, which has been said to be a significant role in high levels of inflammation, increased risk of diseases and cancers. An antioxidant essentially then reduces the free radical production, and the free radicals do cause cell damage and death. So an antioxidant essentially reduces the thing that causes damage. Now, does this necessarily mean that if I take an antioxidant, I will see less damage, which means I will see less cancer? Not necessarily. Those antioxidants may play a pivotal role in reducing free radicals, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they play a role in reducing weight, decreasing obesity rates, improving nutrition levels, and increasing physical activity. So we have to take those things into account. And also, some supplements actually can increase the risk of cancer based on what is in them, the multi-ingredient supplements that we see that say poly blends, that we just don't know what's in those sometimes, and sometimes they have things that can cause cellular damage and we just don't know it. So we have to look at, are supplements necessary for this reason, or can I get what I need from the three things: better physical activity, better nutrition choices, and reduced body fat? It's easy to say eat a supplement because when you take it, you can have that placebo effect of, I've taken something, I'm better now. Whereas if we eat broccoli and chicken and whole grains, we don't necessarily say, oh, I am better. It's just part of our daily habit. And we want to get out of that mindset to know that every bite of a more natural, wholesome food is one step closer to being the healthiest person that we can. So is it better to take a single or multi-supplement every day, or eat more natural, wholesome foods? So single supplement, single nutrient need versus many nutrients. If somebody needs vitamin D because they don't get it, is it better to take that single vitamin D or a multivitamin that has a little bit of vitamin D in it, but has 26 other nutrients and vitamins that maybe that of course that vitamin D supplement didn't have? Certainly, you're going to get more nutrients through natural, wholesome food choices than you would from a supplement. Are those natural, wholesome food choices also going to provide the necessary macronutrients, micronutrients that are needed for the body to continuously work and function on a normal basis? Is that single multi-supplement that you take every day going to help improve nutritional choices, physical activity, body fat percentage? Really have to take into account what's overall better rather than us looking what is going to be quicker or what do I think is going to actually work to lead to better choices. The synergistic effect of many nutrients. In a lot of foods, there are nutrients that we just don't know how they work yet, but we know they work in a positive way when we eat them in a food-based way rather than a supplement way. So sometimes, and you'll probably hear most, if not all, dietitians say if it comes down to food over supplement, you should be picking food. Even though they have calories and people always want to stay away from consuming calories, you have to consume calories and you have to consume those nutrients. It's just how much, how often, when, and why. So recommendations, maintain, of course, the lean body mass, the low fat mass as best as possible. Really trying to get that BMI to that normal range, about 18.5 to 24, low 25, which is the normal range based on, of course, height and your total weight. But you also have to look at how much fat mass you have and lean body mass. So we certainly want to increase the lean body mass and decrease fat mass. Limit dietary fat intake. Choose monounsaturated fatty acids, polyunsaturated fatty acids. omega-3 fatty acids. And a lot of these you can find in flaxseed, hemp seed, walnuts, chia and chia seeds. Olives are a great positive fat food source. Avocados, fish, plethora of others that you can certainly take your choice from. Limit refined sugars, sodas, sugary drinks, alcohol. And notice that it does not say never eat or never drink. It's just limit. If we can make those smaller choices, better choices, we're not sacrificing that we can't and saying that we can't have these. It's just not today. This is not necessary for today. I don't need this. I can make a better, more positive choice for my health. Limit animal foods, so overly processed foods, even the cooking methods of how we cook things, the amount of the animal food. Sometimes we see something on our plate and immediately feel that we have to finish it, and the high-fat dairies. And we know how delicious they can be, but again, limiting them will help reduce that calorie load and that fat load that we're constantly consuming. Increase plant origin foods like veggies, fruits, beans, and whole grains. Plenty of water and tea. And a lot of people always skip the water. They eat so well, but they skip drinking water. Water is absolutely essential. We can go for a few days without, or we can go for about a week or two without eating food. We can only go 2 to 3 days without drinking water. So we have to drink water. We have to get it somehow. It maintains homeostasis. It maintains cellular integrity and fluidity. It helps deliver antioxidants. And it's essentially no calorie. So the more water we can drink, essentially that homeostatic level of our body that we can keep and maintain. No smoking, reduce alcohol, and controlling stress through whatever techniques that we need to do. Breathing, meditation, yoga, even positive social connections will have those positive effects on the foods that we eat. And of course, how much we eat. Some food choices that Precision Nutrition has been so gracious to put on their website. If you ever get a chance, please go on their website. They do a great job with proper nutrition techniques. Beans each day, green leafy vegetables, and just even maintaining. If you were able to do just half of these every day, you have taken a huge step into reducing calorie intake, increase in nutrient intake that helps battle those free radicals and oxidative levels and reduces that cellular damage, which increases essentially the structure and the integrity of our body at a macro level or at a micro level. Half cup of crunchy and cruciferous vegetables, unrefined starchy foods, nuts and seeds, seasonal fruits, and then something that is different, like they call them the wild cards, or herbs, spices, and some of these herbs and spices do have heavy antioxidant properties that we just don't know about. And trying these different things, trying these different techniques can certainly lead. We will never sit there and say, "Oh, I ate this, I can tell my cells are better." It's eat this knowing that you are doing your part to prevent as best as possible these risks of diseases and obesity. So remember, healthy weight, reduced obesity, good nutrition, better positive nutritional choices, and increased physical activity, constantly moving throughout the day, multiple days, most if not all days out of the week, help prevent cancer and obesity. Obesity is highly related to cancer. We know that. We've seen it through many studies. It's pretty much undeniable at this point. If we reduce obesity and the risk of obesity, we can reduce the risk of cancer and other non-communicable diseases, which then can also lead to increased physical output, increased good nutrition, increased and better performance in life. So if there's one thing that should motivate you to take those proper steps into leading a healthier, better life and looking at your nutrition as a whole, even if it's just vegetables, even if it's just water, even if it's just reduction in the highly processed foods, remember, you are one decision away from living a better, healthier, happier life. Just one. Make that one today and make it every day. That is it for today. I hope I didn't get on my soapbox too high today, but I hope you enjoyed it. We will be doing another talk next month. We'll post the information on it soon. If you have any questions or if you'd like to learn a little bit more about how some of nutritional aspects play in disease prevention, please feel free to contact BodyTrack, and we'll send you information. We'll send you pamphlets. We'll send you recipes on different food choices and items and ways that you can increase that protective value, that increased nutrient value of food without sacrificing some of the things that we love, taste and comfort and accessibility. So again, hope this was inspiring. Hope you guys learned a little bit, and hope to catch you at the next webinar. Have a good evening.